All right, we are live with episode 10 of the Authentic You podcast, and I'm here with the living legend, Karen Hacker. And Karen, I was introduced to you by our friend Claude, who's also been on the podcast. The last episode, episode 9 that I had, talked a lot about mental health awareness. And I was struggling and going through a lot. I've been going through a lot. If people are following the podcast religiously, and or if they're just good friends of mine, I've been going through a lot of kind of stressful things. Claude had picked up on that and actually sent me your book, which is 828 Hope in the Darkness. And absolutely fantastic book. And I'm so thankful that you said yes when I reached out to jumping on the podcast and doing this. I promise we'll make this as fun and as painless as possible. But I'd really love to, have you introduce yourself, tell us where people can find you, where they can order the book, and then we'll get started into your story, because your book really starts right away with your story and why you decided to put this book together and what you do today with grief counseling. It's absolutely amazing. And so I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce yourself.
Thanks. Thank you for having me. This isn't something I normally do, but it's something that's, I think, very necessary. The book was, I never ever considered writing a book. It wasn't anything that I sought out to do, but it kind of was made very clear to me that I needed to write this book. To go way back, how I got into this really is through our first pregnancy. Married for a couple of years, decided to have a family, and in my 7th month, we found out that my baby had a heart condition called hypoplastic left heart, and we were told I had to carry to term, thinking that there might be some sort of surgery they could do. And those 2 months, it was around the holidays, and just knowing that my baby probably wasn't going to make it, it was almost
brutal,
unbearable. We just kind of cocooned and stayed inside, because of course every time you go outside, people are like, "Oh, when's your baby due?" I was
Congratulations. Are you having a boy? Are you having a girl?
This is your first.
And how old were you?
I was no. This was in 1989. So yes, I'm very old.
No, but how old were you when you found out?
I was 29.
Yeah. So 29 years old, first pregnancy. People are congratulating you, and you also know at the end of the day that there's going to be some very big challenges at the end of that pregnancy.
Yeah. So, carried him to term, and the doctors had warned us that these types of babies, they look perfectly healthy, but their hearts are just bad and they can't live longer than a couple days. So, delivered, and we were with him for 3 days, and he passed after 2 days, and we were with him the whole time. And after that, we were just broken. How do we go through this? How do we get through the next steps? And it's unimaginable what kind of pain that grief is. And we kind of worked through, did some counseling. And then a year later, on what would have been, and our son's name was Matthew. He was born January 20th, 1990. And what would have been Matthew's first birthday, I found out I was pregnant again. Mm-hmm. So, I felt like I could never be happy again until I held another one of my babies. And through that, the doctors said, you're not ready to even try to get pregnant again until you are able to go through this again.
Yeah,
and
emotionally.
How can you prepare yourself ever to go through this again? But my fear, my desire overcame my fear. And it's like, I always wanted to be a mom. So found out I was pregnant again. And then about 8 weeks later, we miscarried that baby. So into the spiral all over again. So fast forward, we ended up the next year, had our son Ryan, who is now almost 32, and our daughter Avery, who is going to be 30.
I love that name, by the way.
Oh,
Avery.
You.
It's like one of my favorite girl names.
Oh, it's after her great grandma.
Okay.
So, yeah. Avery Christine. And
Sorry.
no, it's okay.
Sorry.
Of course.
So we ended up, this all happened in Northern California. And so we ended up moving down to Southern California when Avery was about 6 months and Ryan was about 2.5. And our friends invited us to this big church, Saddleback Church, which some of you may have heard of before, Pastor Rick Warren.
Yep.
And there were couples that were talking about this grief support group called Empty Arms and giving their testimonies. And so my husband Rick and I were in the back just bawling, thinking,
Yeah.
okay, it wasn't for his job that we ended up moving down here. It was to be a part of this ministry. So we went through the group and became facilitators, and that was in 97. And then they asked us to lead up the ministry, and we've been leading it now for almost 30 years, which is hard to imagine.
Wow.
So in all of that, about 15 years after we had been leading the Empty Arms, my sister had breast cancer, and then my mom also had a different type of cancer. They passed away within 4 months of each other, and similar to your situation, which I think we'll go into a little bit. But and then so that was one after the other, and then the next year my father-in-law passed away, and the next year my mother-in-law passed away, and then my brother got cancer. He died the next year, and then my father, and then my sister-in-law. So within the span of 6 years, I lost 7 immediate family members, and we were always very, very close and devastating. And I just remember crying out to God, going, okay, all this grief, why? What am I supposed to do with all this? We'd been teaching and we knew grief, but you have to go through grief. Yeah. And I'm like, but why so much? And all of a sudden I was, driving. It was actually to my women's Bible study, and a song came on the radio. And through that, I kept seeing these numbers 828, which is a Bible verse. It's Romans 8:28, which says, "In all things, God works good for those who love Him according to His purposes." And not that all things are good, but that God can work and does work good in all things. And I was driving, and this song came on the radio, and it was basically singing that verse. And I just started crying, and I'm like, okay, God, I get it. I keep seeing these numbers, 828 everywhere, and you're, putting this in my face. What am I supposed to do with it? And immediately there was this picture, and it's the picture of the cover of my book.
Oh, wow. And
it said 828, Hope in the Darkness. And I'm like, really? You want me to write a book? I don't know anything about writing a book. Yeah. I mean, I don't have, all sorts of degrees. I'm not credited anything other than I've been leading grief support for so many years. And so I decided I needed to write this book. And so that's kind of how that all came about.
It's so amazing. First of all, thank you for sharing. And, I feel like anytime I meet somebody who's had such a journey, and they always are trying to find the value in it, right? The good in it. There's something that you're experiencing that can be beneficial to the people around you and or other people. And I feel like that's like I don't know what to call it necessarily, but I do feel like it is a blessing at the end of the day, where through pain, through grief, through overcoming, even if you can't obviously get back any of whatever was taken from you, or may have, whatever the situation is, you now have like this experience that you've gone through where when other people are going through it, you get to help mend them quicker, right? Where some people don't ever have that. They don't have that support. They don't have the family structure. Maybe they don't have the friends that are as close to them. Maybe they don't have the ability to go to grief counseling and or seek professional help. And so some people just get lost.
Yeah.
Ultimately, and you hear about it all the time. And there's definitely cases, right, where people then they have ultimately mental health issues, or maybe they become homeless, or maybe they get into drugs, or they get into some other addiction, whether it's a healthy addiction or a bad addiction. I've shared a little bit about some positives that I've had coming out of grief and some negatives that I've had coming up. Either way, I do feel like people attached to something.
Yep.
But I think that what you attached to was really your faith.
Yeah. that's truly what got us through. I mean, it's hard to understand how people can get through some of the really tough things in life. Life is hard. There's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff. And if you don't have hope and belief that there's got to be some reason, some purpose in this, some bigger plan, had anyone told me, when I was 29, 30 years old that I would be leading grief support groups for 30 years or writing a book or, doing this stuff, I would have said, there is no way.
Yeah.
But you have to trust it's like God's got a bigger plan. And it is through our toughest things, I think, where we learn and grow the most. And if we can't use our experiences to help other people through it, then what was the point in us going through it?
Yeah. Do you find that sometimes people, because you're in grief counseling, do you ever find that people sometimes think you're always giving them advice?
I hope not.
Yeah.
I mean, just recently, one of our dear friends just passed away, and it was a couple that we were super close with, and I do find myself kind of stepping back and letting the other people that are around share their situation, because I don't want to overstep and feel like, oh well, she's a know-it-all and she knows everything about grief and she's just trying to tell us what to do. I really hope that's not the case. I try to be sensitive to that, but sometimes I'm thinking, oh, just read my book because it's all in there.
Yeah. Well, and that was going to be my follow-up to that is, do you feel like you have a responsibility to help?
I do. It is a huge passion. That's why I do what I do. I mean, once you go through something that is so painful and that you're in that deep grief, you become a different person.
Yeah.
And you become more compassionate, more empathetic. You want to help people through it because you know how painful it was to go through it. And if you can help someone through it, then that helps you too.
Yeah.
So oftentimes, when we go through our grief groups, that's a huge part of it. It's just saying, there's going to be people that come in your path that have a similar story. And if you can share what you went through, it's going to help them.
Yeah.
And ultimately it helps you,
Correct.
To be a blessing to others.
Yep.
So everyone benefits from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think what I've started to experience in the last 6 months, 5 to 6 months is a little bit of that, for me, I think I'm finding a little bit of my way where beforehand, before the 5 or 6 months ago, before this podcast, people would have an experience that they'd share with me because I'm a very open person, and they would share something that they were going through. And then I would just kind of one-on-one kind of navigate that. But I wouldn't openly share with many people each of those specific situations because unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to look at it, life has hit me in the face several times throughout the years and at different stages, a lot of them very young, which I think has been beneficial to me to get to my point. I'm in my mid-30s, and I think it's helped me be a lot more mature when I was in my 20s and my early 30s, and helped me kind of get to where I'm at to be more established. But so I think I'm starting to find that it's a blessing in that I have a responsibility because I've experienced this, and I'm not necessarily overcome each one of those obstacles, because pain doesn't really go away. Right. And it doesn't necessarily get mended either, but the way that I've navigated through it, or the way that I experience it, I now feel like I have that obligation to share that with people and try my best. And sometimes even it's as simple as just talking about it openly and having people hear your story. That helps them. Mm-hmm. They almost don't even need to, experience it themselves. But when they get to a point in their life where they happen, they get a reference back to that. Something I'll share with you is actually when I started reading your book, I actually started crying reading like your introduction and trying to like put myself in your perspective of, having your first child, knowing and having to carry for so many months, and ultimately knowing that there was a very slim chance that there was going to be a solution at the end that was going to be a happy one. And so I'm putting myself in the mindset, and I was like, okay. And then I overcame that, right? I kind of overcame it with you as I was reading it.
Yeah.
And then you got pregnant again. And then I was like, oh no. Like I really felt like I was almost watching a movie or something as I was reading it. I felt the anxiety building in me a little bit. And then you experienced it again. Right. And so I think, I really do encourage people to read your book, because I think the way that you've laid it out really shows people the ability to kind of overcome. And I also love the fact that you, even in your introduction right now, you really also went into your family life. You did end up having, right? The one thing you said you wanted the most was to be a mom. You want to be there for children. You want to raise children. You want that love that only parents can describe. I always love when people are like, I don't have kids, but I have my dog. And I'm like, yeah, I get it, but have kids.
It's something different.
Yeah, have kids. You'll know.
Yeah. But some people don't get that happy ending too.
Yeah, that's true.
So you have to find other things.
That is true. I won't mention her name unless, maybe she'll be comfortable with me doing it if she watches this. But I do have a family member that got pregnant and miscarried. And she had shared already. She had shared with people that she was pregnant. And so she did need to then, go and share that she had lost the baby. She didn't need to. That's probably a better way to say it. She didn't need to, but obviously it was part of maybe her grief recovery was to let people know, because I'm sure after sharing that you're pregnant, people are going to reach out to you like, how is everything? How's it going? And now you're, having to explain what happened probably multiple times, which is uncomfortable, especially in a day of Facebook and Instagram and things like that. You share a picture of your pregnancy and then people are like, hey, wait, that was 8 months ago, but you're not pregnant anymore. What's going on? So she was actually told that she was not going to be able to have kids after that. And I think that was a little bit more devastating than anything. And then what was really interesting and like kind of very rewarding to watch was she really said, there's nothing I can do then, right? This happened to me. It happened to me for a reason. I need to get through this with my husband. They really just grew together, spent their time as a couple. And maybe it was the fact that there was less stress on the body. Maybe it was God's will. She ended up getting pregnant with twins, a boy and a girl. She carried full term, and I think they're 2 now.
Oh,
so
and we see that happen a lot, and I think a lot of it does do with the stress, or someone will make the decision then to adopt, and then shortly after they adopt, then they get pregnant and have another one. Yeah,
I do have another friend that she couldn't have kids, and they tried in vitro and they tried multiple different things, and it unfortunately did not work. They then got notice that they were awarded an adoption, and it's crazy because the daughter is now 4 or 5 and literally looks like both the parents. Like if you were to like do an AI of like both the parents and it's crazy just the way that it works. I don't know. And I'm sure eventually, from an adoption standpoint, they'll have to have that conversation and share, but I don't know how that works ultimately. One thing I wanted to get to, because I mentioned it in my last podcast with Jessica, the stages of grief. I think it'd be really helpful for you to maybe talk about that and, how that has maybe impacted you a little bit over the years, especially with, your losses.
Yeah. People talk about the, 5 basic stages of grief, but we don't really like to think of it as stages of grief. I feel like there are so many emotions, and in the book, there's that tangled web of emotions. There are so many emotions that are involved with grief that people don't even really think about. So, there's envy and jealousy and despair and pain and sadness and, things that you would typically think, but there's a lot underlying. Anger, is one of the stages, and acceptance. And so, acceptance is really, the last part of it. But everything else is just a jumbled mess where
Yeah.
you just you can't even figure out what's going on. You feel like you're losing your mind because you've got so many different emotions swirling around in your head. And what we encourage so much is writing,
Right.
journaling, you know, um, journaling just to journal, or journal as in, a gratitude, thankful type writing, or a prayer journal, something, because to get all of those emotions out is healthy and good, to just be able to write things down and be able to identify them, and then you could acknowledge them and move forward.
Yeah.
So,
I know you watched the last podcast, and I mentioned that I had wrote, obviously, a letter, and I kept it for years, and I would read it from time to time. And it really wasn't like, I mean, I say years, but it really wasn't that long of a period of time before I ended up doing professional help. And they were like, you have to get rid of this, because the mindset for me at that time was completely different. Right. I was I was not even a year fully recovered from a drug addiction. And so the person I was, what they explained to me was that it was the opposite, right? It wasn't a journal. It wasn't a helpful thing. It wasn't gratitude. It was despair, right? It was total, woe is me. This is why I'm a burden. And, this is that. But I did find value in reading it because I knew that was not my mentality. Right. And so I'm literally reading it from time to time and being like, that makes no sense.
Yeah, that's not me anymore.
That's not me. People do love me. People do care about me. I'm not a burden. I am capable in doing other things. I can be of value to other people. I have these other qualities that I'm not that person anymore. But it took me years to figure that out. The other thing is, and I think, I've never tried journaling. But what I do know is, as I'm having conversations with people, I've started to notice people will call me out when I'm talking negatively about myself. And I do that often. I don't know if it's something that, is just part of maybe some of the grief that I've gone through or past situations, but I'll start to, I could, and it's like, okay, but you're focusing on like the bottom 20% versus like the other 80, 90% of who you really are. Yeah. Right. Like, so as you're going through grief counseling, do you find people a lot of times, because they're so, they're sad, right? They're in a sensitive state. Do you find that you kind of have to help get them to focus on the positive?
Yep. And in some of the writing exercises that we do, we always say to date it, because that way you can see where you were and how far you've come. And if you get in that habit, you can see the progression, and that you are, moving forward in a more positive direction. And I don't know if that really answered your question.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, yeah, no, it does. I mean, so like, because I'm kind of curious, because how often do people go to the counseling or the group?
It's an 8-week program.
Okay.
Not that you're going to be done with your grief in 8 weeks by any means, but we provide tools to help you through those, the next year to 2, and not like you're ever going to be fully done with grief, because, I say that grief and love go hand in hand. I mean, the more deeply we love, the more deeper we grieve, and you're always going to have triggers that are going to throw you into, a grief state or emotional state. Because that love that you have for that, whatever you lost, whether it was a loved one or what have you, that love never goes away. So your grief is never going to fully go away.
Yeah.
So, so for our group, it's a different topic each night, and first night we'd share our stories, being open and really talking about it. And that's kind of, I kind of work through the whole program in the book of the different topics. And, we talk about family and friends and how they can be very supportive or not very supportive. And sometimes they say really stupid things, but it's not because they mean to. People just don't know what to say.
Yeah.
And sometimes they just don't quite hit the mark.
Yeah.
And, where is God in this? And anger. You know, people can get very angry. They can get angry at God. Can get angry at themselves or other people. So there's another exercise we do to try to work through that. And we've learned, and we use part of this exercise is the anger portion of it. We look at how was anger modeled for you growing up.
Interesting.
And for me, I'm a pretty calm, easygoing person. We didn't really do anger in our household.
Yeah.
I don't ever remember my parents raising their voice. I don't ever remember them fighting.
Oh, we're going down. You got me in a rabbit hole right now. I'm thinking about this. Okay.
And, you know, my parents were educators. My dad, he had a psychology or doctorate in psychology from Stanford. And you know, my mom was a teacher of special ed. So we discussed everything. You know, it was always lots of discussions. And, but then, you know, we've come across lots of other people through our groups. They've had really, really rough upbringings. And they have then noticed how they handle anger because of how it was modeled for them. So it's something to think about, you know, and what are we showing to our kids?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, anger is, if anybody was to ever say, what are you afraid of? I'm most afraid of myself and how angry I can get at times, because it's almost, it feels like an uncontrollable state, because it's not that like you don't intend, you never set out to intend, like I'm going to be a jerk right now, or I'm going to raise my voice or whatever it is. And I'm not a small guy. So when I get angry, it's scary. Yeah, it's scary, unfortunately. And I get more scared after the fact. Like anytime I've exploded or had a, definitely not recently, but like when I was younger, I would get physical with people, whether I was drinking or whether, I needed to feel like I needed to protect myself or ego stepped in, whatever it was. I always immediately felt regret after I would do something with anger, because it's just not who I am.
Right.
But to your point, my upbringing, there was a lot of arguing. I mean, every day there was an argument. Every day, a lot of screaming, a lot of you did this wrong, you did that wrong. Nothing physical though, but a lot of screaming. And it's something for me that I don't want around me, because it puts me in that like little kid state of mind, right? Where then you get a little sheltered. Like for me, it's hard to, if I'm having a disagreement with somebody, like immediately I just want to shut down. I don't want to even have a conversation, because usually anger starts. So and I've done obviously some evaluation of this, because I've really tried to get out of it. But even to today, with as much as I've tried to work on it, if I get into an argument with my girlfriend, or sorry, Marie, if I get into an argument with a friend or somebody that I care about, a lot of times I ultimately just don't want to fight with them, because I know no matter what I do, I'm going to turn the anger switch on, and I'm probably going to say something hurtful, do something hurtful. It's not good. So I just shut down. And that is something that I'm having to try to work through. Maria's been really great about helping me through that. Like, hey, talk to me. What are you feeling? And then sometimes I just say something and she's like, you really need to work on what you say when you're upset, because you say stuff that, you don't necessarily mean, or you don't really like think the same way. So it's interesting that you brought that up, because I could see how from a grief, management perspective, like some people are just like, they've had that lifetime experience of anger and frustration, and they just like turn to that. It's like, life sucks, or whatever. There's like, it's hard to get the gratitude out, I guess.
Or they get angry at God, and that's okay too. God can handle it. Just as we get angry at our earthly fathers, they still love us, and he'll still love us too. So
I do find praying ultimately, and I tell people all the time, I say, listen, I don't go to church every Sunday. I actually probably should. I should prioritize it a lot more. But I am very religious, and every day, I literally go for a walk in the morning, and that's meditating. I'm praying, and I'm thinking, I'm reflecting, and what am I thankful for? What do I have? What have I been blessed with recently? Who's been put in my life, whether it was for a minute or a year? Like, I try to find like, are those people, it's actually happened to me. I should probably share this story, but I actually feel like the other day, like an angel came to me. Like, I don't know what the situation was. I can tell you the story, but sometimes those moments, they make you feel gratitude for just being here and being who you are and being, very humble. And, I really think religion has helped me. I pray before every meal, and same thing. It's a gratitude thing. So I'm not journaling, but when I eat, before I eat, what am I thankful for? And a lot of times I just want the very simple thing. I just want to be able to live the life that God has put in front of me, right? The path that he has designed for me. And I want to be able to help other people who can't help themselves. Because the reality is everyone needs something from other people. We're put on this place as for a community aspect. So it doesn't mean that you can't figure out how to do X, Y, or Z item, but it's like, I have things that are valuable to me that I can share with somebody, and you have things that are valuable to you that you can share with somebody. And as a community of this world,
right,
together, we can actually solve a lot, But I'll tell you this story. And
yes, I want to hear.
So I was going to say, I say angel, but I just think of it as, God works in mysterious ways. And ultimately, this was just one of those like kind of humbling, interactions. So, backstory is I've been cleaning my apartment because Maria was coming into town, and I was like, there's a bunch of stuff I need to donate. So I took a bunch of clothes and jackets and things that just I don't need anymore, and I put them into a bin, and I was like, I'm going to donate these. Well, the last couple of days have been busy, and so they've just been in my car, and they're just sitting there. Taking my son home from his boxing lesson, drop him off. I go to Costco to get some flowers, so when Maria comes, she could have flowers waiting for her. Keynote guys.
Nice guy.
Preparation.
Doing all the right stuff.
Right. So it's, Costco is basically closing. It's 8:30 at night. Okay. It's cold. It's cold. And I'm driving from Costco, and immediately I see a woman off to the right. She's probably about my age, maybe earlier 30s. And she does not look homeless, but she does not have a shirt on, and she has a bra and it's torn, and she's holding herself. And there's a guy on a bike, kind of like, I don't know. I couldn't tell if he was with her, if he had maybe done something to her, if he was it didn't seem like he was trying to help her. That's for sure. He was just kind of there. And then there's other people, other cars driving around, and I get very upset about stuff like this, but I'm like, when has it become normal? Like when does that happen? When do you see a woman in her 30s, shirtless with a torn bra, and nobody wants to stop to help or do anything? It's like, oh, well, must be a drug addict, or must be some whatever people are assuming. But immediately I freak out. I'm like, this woman needs help. Like, what? How is everybody just
ignoring her?
Ignoring her. And there's a Chili's right there. And there's families, and there's parents and husbands and kids, and there's a bunch of people around, and not a single person saying anything to her. And she looks, again, like something's not right. Okay. And so I turn around, and I immediately was like, huh, you have clothes in your car. And then also immediately, as I realized that, I just thought, like, you're supposed to, you can, part of the Bible tells you to feed and clothe people. Like, be a good steward, be a resource to people. Right. I'm like, I have clothes. I could literally just clothe this woman.
Yes. Yes.
And so I pull into the Chili's area, and she's walking back up. Now the guy on the bike had gone. So again, I don't know if he was part of the situation. I don't know what happened to her ultimately. But I see her, and she looks like she's, had been crying or something had happened. And I just say, I was like, hey, I have clothes for you. That's the first thing I said. I have clothes for you. Please come here. And she immediately comes down, and she's standoffish, right? She's not going to get right next to me. She's also not really talking. She's not very responsive, and she's not looking me in my eyes. But at the end of the day, I just know that I have clothes, and she needs clothes. And so I was like, here's a shirt. and they're all clean. Everything's clean. In fact, the one I handed her actually had a tag on it. So I handed her a t-shirt, and she put that on, and she literally went to go walk away. And I was like, no. I was like, I have a jacket too. I was like, would you like a jacket? And she's like, yes. So then I handed her the jacket, and I was like, are you okay? And she said, yeah. And I was like, are you sure? She's like, yeah. I was like, do you need any other help? I could help you. And she's like, no. And like literally just not making eye contact, not really responding. She's not clean necessarily. So again, I'm not saying that she was homeless, but she definitely didn't look like she was.
Right.
It just seemed that maybe she got into some kind of altercation or some type of situation. And I don't know if it was the guy. There's a lot of bushes there. I don't know if they got into a physical fight. Maybe, again, I'm making a lot of assumptions here. But this is where it gets very interesting to me. So I do that, and I was like, okay. I was just like she just starts kind of walking off, and I'm just like kind of sitting there like, what just happened, right? And I also had put shoes in there. Now, granted, my shoes are not going to fit this lady. I mean, the shirt and the jacket aren't going to fit her, but ultimately, at least now she's clothed. And I was just like, oh, I should give her these shoes. She's gone. I don't know how. I don't know where. I don't know. Like, this is not an area to just disappear from. She's gone. And again, nobody else was helping her. And so I can't help but feel sometimes like, was she only visible to me? You know, I'm not psychotic here. I'm not like, right. But you just don't know. So like, right. I'm pretty certain that maybe she just disappeared right into other cars and whatever, you know, I'm logical. I'm not some crazy nut. But as I was telling Maria this story, I can't help but get kind of emotional about it, because ultimately that's what I ask for all the time, is just to be able to help people, help those who can't help themselves. But this woman disappeared on me, and nobody else was helping her, and nobody else was really even acknowledging that the situation happened. And so it made me feel like I'm driving home, and I text her immediately and I say, something just amazing happened. Now she's 3 hours ahead, so she was asleep. But it just makes me feel like, it made me feel really good. And it made me feel like, okay, maybe logical, this lady just took off. But also maybe God was just like, hey, I got bad news earlier in the day, right? And I pray for the same thing all the time. He's like, let me see if you'll act on it.
Yeah.
And I acted on it, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, that was the story. And I don't know if she was an angel or if she was some lady who just needed some help and was quick on her feet. But yeah, that was the situation.
That's cool. And I feel like, you know, there are things that are presented to us, and it's, what's your choice and how are you going to handle it? You know, and maybe it was a little test from him just to see, you know, this is what you're asking for. Prove it to me that you're going to follow through on that.
Yeah. Know? Yeah. It would have certainly been more convenient for me to just drive off. Right.
Right. Like everyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I also think about, like the timing of things and how, like, it's interesting that I was like, I mean, I've had these clothes and this stuff. There was no reason that I needed to put a whole bin together. You know what I mean? She wouldn't have cared if my closet was full of crap. But for some reason, I was like, I need to. And you actually, it was funny because she actually was like, "What are you doing?" You're like, we were on the phone when I was doing. I was like, "I'm cleaning up my stuff. I'm cleaning out my closet." She's like, "Really? Why?" I'm like, "I don't know. I just need to." And here it is. You know, a couple of days later, that's why.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. I feel like sometimes when I'm going through something, I've started to latch onto that. I said, I don't know why I'm going through this, but I feel like I'm going to find out, you know?
Yep.
I feel like I'm going to find out.
And I feel like God gives you these gifts. And if we're open and aware, there are gifts all around us every day that, you know, whether it's, you know, on your walk or whatever, and you see something beautiful or a sunset or a sunrise or, you know, this woman that you could help. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we don't know what's going to come our way, but I truly believe that he gives you these little gifts to help you through whatever you're going through. And you felt good after that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's like a funny story that I've read a bunch of times and it's come across, like I've seen it like on TikTok and stuff. And it's like the whole, you don't know what something is until like you kind of see it all the way through. Like you don't know if it's a gift or if it's a curse or if it's something that's going to be negative to you later. And it's like a story of like an old Chinese like proverb of basically like this horse runs up on a ranch and the son is like, oh my God, Dad, look, like it's a free horse. This horse, like it's a wild horse. Like we now have this horse. It's a blessing. And the dad's like, we'll see. Right. And then the kid gets on the horse and starts riding it and he falls off and breaks his leg. And he's like, oh my God, this is horrible. Like, this is such a bad situation. Like, I just broke my leg. It's like, this is horrible. And the dad's like, yeah, or we'll see. And then the like Chinese dynasty came in and was looking for all the men that were healthy enough to go and fight in a war. And the son had broke his leg, so he couldn't go out to fight. And so the son looked at his father and was like, is this a blessing? Right. So like the story just continues like that, where it just gives different examples of like, it all starts from like a gift. Yeah. And then it's like, well, was it a gift? Well, then, now it's not a gift. Well, but then it becomes a gift. So it's just like, yeah, I think life is like that sometimes.
It's just different perspective. I mean, even like, okay, so like my book, sorry to bring it back to the book, but you know, in all things, God works good. When you're in the midst of something that's just awful, you think, how could there be any good that comes out of it? But then over time, you can look back and like, oh, you know, there are some reasons why, or there were some people that came into my life at that time that I would never have met before, or, you know, things happen. And, you know, if you can focus on those good things and see, you know, that there are some reasons why certain things happen in our life. You know, there are some really yucky things that happen in this life, but you know, it's all about your perspective too, and down the road and how you're going to get through it and your choices on how to get through it. And then you can look back and see, you know what, would I love to have my son and my baby and my family members back? Yes. But there have been so many incredible blessings along the way that, you know, yes, I miss them all and I would love to have them here.
Yeah.
But life goes on and you've got to try to work through it the best way you can do. And
yeah, I always feel like to that point, like I lost two of my best friends very early. I was 17 when my best friend passed away. He was 18. And at the time, to your point, I was broken. It was devastating, right? I mean, this guy, we grew up since we were like 6 years old, 7 years old. It was like my brother, you know, best friend. And it was so devastating to me that at the time it just put me in like that spiral that led to other things. And I don't want to blame him for he didn't do anything. I don't want to put it on his death. Ultimately, I became an adult and made my own choices. But one of the most valuable things about experiencing death so young and then experiencing it again and even experiencing it myself with my addiction, I really value time. Yeah. I value it in a different way. And Jessica and I talked about this as well because her brother, you know, committed suicide and he was young and she was young when it happened. I think she said she was 21. And so you experiencing it at a certain age like that, you really do start to appreciate things differently. Yeah. And life so now I start, what's that?
I said, life is short. You just don't know. But go ahead.
Yeah, no. Well, to that point, you really don't. And so then later in life, right, you start to experience those additional deaths of like a grandparent or an uncle or somebody that's a little bit more older. And I'm not taking away the grief from people because I will say that's one of the things that I wish I would be able to endure a little differently. I go to funerals and I'm a little numb to them because I feel like I know how to process that grief. And it's always, for me, it's a little uncomfortable to be at a funeral where someone's like 95 years old and everyone in the room is crying. I'm like, why are you guys crying? Like in my mind, I'm like, there should be an appreciation. Like this person lived a full life. Look at you. All of you are here because of that person. Yeah. You know, it's crazy. Like there's like 4 or 5 however many generations, right? There's definitely grandkids, great grandkids, and so on.
Be a celebration. I love the celebration of life.
Yeah, yeah. So I get a little uncomfortable in those type of settings, but I do feel like I'm able to handle when it's more of a sudden loss, a little differently. And so it's just kind of one of those things where like, I feel like, I don't know, it's still kind of to be determined. Right. But like for me, I like to be like, well, I hope I live a full life, but I know what I've experienced. I know what I'm doing. And I also know I'm not blind to the fact that like, and I joke about this and maybe I shouldn't, but I joke about it all the time and people call me out on it, especially Maria. I literally will be like, I could leave here and get hit by a car. I could get in a car accident on the way home. You know what I mean? I could take 1,000 milligrams of caffeine and have a heart attack. I don't know. Something can happen to me, right? I could develop cancer. You know, something ultimately can happen that's out of maybe my control. And so I really try to live with a lot more intention. Does that come up in grief counseling? Like, does that, as you're working with people, like they're here, right? And you want them to focus on the positive. Do you start to kind of hyper focus on some of those things?
Well, I think anytime there's intense loss or grief, it's like you have a much greater appreciation for life. And so, I know for me, I don't want to live life with any regrets. And because I have seen so much loss, for my brother was 57, my sister was 54. So they were young.
Yeah.
And, then our babies too. It's like we're not guaranteed a long life.
Yeah.
It is harder, for, like loss of a child. It's like parents are not supposed to outlive their children.
Yeah.
So it's out of the ordinary, progression of what you normally think things should be. So, to answer your question, which I don't even think I even answered it, but I think that experiencing loss like that, you do have a different appreciation for life and you live more intentionally. And like I said before, you have this compassion and empathy for people that are going through it.
Yeah.
And help them through it.
Yeah.
So,
I definitely think it's helped me live with a lot more intention. The losses, and even recently last year when my sister had passed, and actually even before that, we're talking about dogs and comparing them to kids, but I had a dog that was over 10 years old and she passed. And then my sister passed, and then my grandma passed. Right. And so for me, it was like loss. And I had previously to that already, like I said, had kind of my shield rebuilt from experiencing loss of two best friends to also experiencing myself where I was almost lost several times. And, once through drug addiction, once through a car accident, once through a failed suicide attempt. And I was just like, well, here we are again. And, can't do anything about my dog, unfortunately. She ended up getting breast cancer and, she passed, right? 2 surgeries didn't work, unfortunately. My sister, we knew about it. We knew she had a deteriorating heart. We knew that she was going to pass young. I had actually told people for years that we'd be lucky if she made it to 40. So I had mentally prepped. She actually passed a week after her 41st birthday. So she made it to 40. She lived that extra year.
Was this something diagnosed early on, or what?
Years. She had been dealing with it. She had been dealing with it for maybe about 10 years. 10 years. Now she unfortunately did get into drugs, and that probably expedited things. She might have got an extra few years. I don't know. She probably would have been a better candidate for a transplant. That's for sure. But that was the stage that she had got to. And with transplants, you have to be sick enough to need it, healthy enough to receive it.
Right.
And unfortunately for her, she towards the end she was clean for a period of time, or at least we believe she was. And then it seemed like she started using again, and in the hospital, they can tell.
Yeah.
They don't just do a drug test. They do a hair follicle test. They're going to know if it's within 5 years. And so at that point, like if you're failing stuff like that, they're not going to they're not going to risk it. They're not going to. Right. And so, just to kind of like get back to, the intentional piece of it, I had to really go back so many times. I was like, okay, you're experiencing all these loss. Where can you focus on the positives? Well, there's not necessarily positives in those situations. Like there's not a lot of positive I can focus on. So I really latched on to, I do this thing called 4,000 weeks, and it's literally I've talked about it a few times on here, but check it out if you've never heard of that. It's literally a poster, and it's 52 boxes from left to right. So it's 1 year of your life in weeks, right?
Okay.
And then it goes all the way down until the average lifespan, which is 4,000 weeks, and it's like 78 years old or something like that.
Wow.
And so when you order it, you type in your birthday, it'll pre-fill all the boxes up until like basically the week before they mail it to you. And then from there on, it's up to you to essentially fill in. It's a little tiny box, and you just check off that box every single week that you live. And the whole intention of it is really to show you, one, how quick a week goes, right? And two, to look at all the boxes that you possibly have left that you can live, and they do get shorter. Right. And like, I've been doing this for years now. And so I look at the board sometimes, I'm like, oh man, like I remember when I started this, and it's just fast. I mean, it's going quick. But what I try to do is in weeks like that, especially the hardest weeks that I have, I try to check off the box, and I just stare at it, and I literally go, did you do what you wanted to do this week? Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the answer is no. Did you add value to someone other than yourself? Because that's what I care about. That ultimately I feel like is my mission in life. So did I add value to somebody else? Did I do simple things, right? Was I mean to anybody? Do I need to apologize to anybody? Did I focus on goals and things that like ultimately I said I'm going to do or I want to do? Because again, I don't know how many of these boxes are going to be left. So I feel like it helps me a lot with making sure that I'm progressing through life and that I'm staying focused on overall the things that matter to me. Because if I'm mean to somebody, it allows me the opportunity to make amends, which is important to me because, again, you don't know when you're going to go, right? So if you're a jerk to somebody and then get in the car and get in a car accident, well, guess what? Their last impression of you was you're a jerk.
Yeah.
So I've made amends with a lot of people, especially after my sister passed away. I made amends with a lot of people because I was recommending it to her. I said, listen, your health's deteriorating. You probably, unless you get a transplant, you're going to pass within the next, they gave her 6 months to a year. And so she was already at like month 8. And I literally was like, have you made amends with people? Because you really need to, I mean, you're fighting a clock here. That's counting down pretty quickly.
Right. And a lot of people don't have that knowledge.
I would much rather have that. Yeah. I would much rather, personally, I would, but I don't know. That's kind of a different topic now that I think about that. But so just going back to it. So it literally, maybe that connects to like how you journal. Maybe that connects to how other people are dealing, gratitude, prayer, all of that. However you do it, I feel like all of those are the same though. Mm-hmm. You're really taking inventory of your life. Right. And so whether it's boxes, journaling, just an appreciation or prayer, I think ultimately you're just taking inventory of what's going on.
Yeah. And just self-awareness of just how you want to live your life and how you're treating others through it. I love that. I think my boxes would be very much shorter.
Yeah, well,
I wouldn't have just because I'm older.
I have thought about that though too. I have actually thought about, and I'm weird like this, I think about different stages. So right now I'm constantly thinking about my stage in life when I turn 40. And when I hit 40, I think I'll start thinking about my stages of life when I'm turning 50. And I like to think more like 10 years in advance. So I've been thinking about turning 40 for like the last 5-6 years.
Well, I'll be lucky if I have, I'm 64. So, that's, I'll be lucky if I have another 20 years.
Yeah.
So you think about those things. It's like, how do I want to live my life?
Correct. Yeah. And I think that's the part about it that I enjoy the most is I look at it and I go, gosh, when I am in my 60s or 70s, like, and this thing only goes till you're 78 because it's the average lifespan. So I can only imagine if I'm like, I don't know, I'm like, would I be super rewarded? Like, would I be very happy to check off the last box on that thing and call them and be like, excuse me,
I need more.
I need more boxes. Yeah.
But I was afraid to even, I didn't think I would make it to 60 because my sister and my brother didn't.
Yeah.
So turning 60 was a big thing for me.
Yeah.
And now I'm just like, okay, whatever. It's, you know,
Yeah.
it's
That's
icing on the cake.
Cherry on top.
Yes.
Well, so that is also one thing that maybe why I kind of live the way that I do is there is a box that I've checked red, which is when I had overdosed. Mm-hmm. So on my 19th birthday, I overdosed, and then 2 weeks later, I overdosed again. And so I have that box red, and I think about it a lot of times that like pretty much everything from there on was cherry on top. Like all the things, good and bad, that I've experienced in my life are essentially
added
bonuses. But then I also now think about it from that aspect of going, today I can completely decide to change my life. This year I've changed. I mean, I've literally took my life and like flipped it around. For anybody who knows me personally, I've changed a lot of things in my life. So, you know, you can wake up one day and decide you want to do, you can quit your job, you know, you can get a divorce, you could start a whole new family. You could do like, you could do anything. You could decide to retire if you wanted to. You could decide to sell everything and live out of a van. I mean, everyone has a choice of the life that they want to live. You know, ultimately, like you said, you now have made it past where your brother and sister did not. And so how do you want to live your life? Mm-hmm. What do you want to do? Who do you want to spend your time with? You know? Yeah, it's fun. So if somebody, how do people come to the grief counseling and sign up for the 8-week program, and like what would be their steps?
Okay. So for our grief counseling that we do it through Saddleback Church, and it's called Empty Arms, and that is for people that have had miscarriage, stillbirth, or infant death. Okay. And that is the 8-week program that we do. You can reach me through Karen at 828hope.com. It's my email address, or through Saddleback Church. It's on their website. But then, you know, we've started a nonprofit called 828 Hope in the Darkness, and our website is 828hope.com. So we're just starting out, but we're really trying to just focus on the grief community and provide counseling and resources to help anyone through whatever they're going through. I wanted to share something. I don't know if you read in the book. There's one of the chapters is about survival and hope of different people and their stories. And there were 2 girls that went through our group about 2 years ago, and they became friends. And one is she is a fitness trainer, boxer. Okay. And she has quite a following. Her name's Ashley Garassi, and she trains at Box House in Newport and some other local clubs. But she invited me and this other girl, Tara, whose story is in the book, to come to one of her classes. And so we did this boxing thing. And I don't know anything about boxing, but it's like, okay, well, you know, I want to support her. And you know, there are 2 young girls that just recently had lost their sons. And so we went through this class, and it was amazing of how therapeutic it was just to be hitting something. And so when we came back to the next session, the one girl, Tara, she said it was incredible because we felt like we were just punching out our pain. And so they've created a nonprofit also called Gloves for Grief. And so they're starting different events around. And we're having one actually on Father's Day, or the day before Father's Day, for men. Because I think that men in grief is something that isn't really talked about. Yeah. And, you know, women, we have our outlets if we talk to our girlfriends, and we, you know, process, I think, much easier because we're able to talk through it. But with men, I think there's such a need, and that's why I appreciate what you're doing to have a platform where men can share, you know, intimate things. So I just wanted to share about that. I've got some information for that too. But Gloves for Grief is another program that is instrumental in just helping people work through their grief and their pain. So.
Well, I love seeing the fact that you are obviously helping in one area, and then through what you've helped and accomplished somebody else, or what you've done with somebody else, now they're able to do that. And I feel like, again, the community aspect, right? It just grows and grows and grows. And people who have navigated through something traumatic and ultimately once they've, again, it doesn't go away, but their grief doesn't go away. But ultimately, once they feel that they've gotten to a comfortable, stable platform, they can be a good foundation for other people, and so on and so forth. So for your foundation, you said it's nonprofit,
Right.
and you just started. And so are there going to be events, or how what are you going to be doing, right? Like, what's the goal, I guess?
The goal is to be more of just a resource to help people. I think eventually my husband and I would love to be able to start other grief groups in other hospitals or churches or wherever. So, and speaking events, just to help educate people on grief and how to get through it. And then also promote other organizations such as Gloves for Grief. There's another great one in Orange County called Forever Footprints, which is they do an annual walk called the Walk to Remember. And so there's lots of different programs out there. So we would like to, just be able to be a support for the lost community and help wherever we can help, and provide the information people need to get through whatever they're going through.
Awesome.
So
Okay. Well, if on the website there's a landing page to donate, I'm sure. Okay, so I will definitely pledge something from Authentic You.
Thank you.
And if ever needed, and there's gentlemen or however you see fit, I'd be happy to share some of my story as you need. Right. I think ultimately from a community aspect, it's important for, like you said, guys we're very tough shelled, and it's hard to pull back some of those layers. Right. But I do think, a lot of men, I think they want to share. They almost, I know personally for myself, like it was like a screaming voice inside was just like, please help me,
Yep.
And you just don't let it out, Yep. I had a gentleman tell me actually that he had saw me, and it's funny that you mentioned like the boxing, how like you were punching your pain away. I really think the gym did that for me for a long time, because that's just something that was a great outlet for me. But somebody had mentioned that to me, that they were like, yeah, when I saw you when you were like 400 pounds, you literally looked dead inside. That was the way he said it. He's like, you looked dead inside. Like don't talk to that guy. And then as you start kind of working yourself through grief and through pain and through whatever life is throwing your way, you just, the mood changes, right? And it's interesting. Like, I think it's even like, we watched some videos on like TikTok or Reels where it's like men walking by themselves, and they're just, all of them are just, no joke, they're just, oh yeah, all of them just they just have this like depressed look on their face. And then they see like their partner, their boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, and they just like light up. Like it's funny to just see the change. Yep. And I think that's really what it is. Like a lot of guys, they're in their own head. Yeah. They're really in their own head a lot of times. And they don't really want to talk about stuff like that, but they need it. Yep. They really do.
It's funny in our groups, we always, for the first session, we kind of go around and do introductions, and we ask them, what do you hope to get out of this group? And a lot of times the guys will say, well, I'm here to support my wife. And so, which is lovely, but halfway through, they're like, oh, I guess I needed this too, because then they start opening up, and it's emotional, and people sharing, and some of the guys, they share more than, some of the women do. Yeah. So I think there's definitely a need for an outlet to help you guys open up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things that I'm going to do, I attempted to do, but funny enough, guys, we don't make time for anything helpful for ourselves. We don't go to doctor's offices. Yeah. We don't go to therapy. And we rarely go to like, do other things like buy ourselves clothes. It's like we put ourselves absolutely last for whatever reason. It's like just the way that men like to do things. So I've been talking to several guys who've been either watching the podcast or have seen some of the reels, or just in general, we've been talking about a lot of things. And I really am going to try to get like a very large, like more of a group setting, and try to do an open kind of something like that. Yeah. But I think it's helpful. I think for some reason, if people dedicate time to self-improvement, you start an 8-week program. I think it's it's just the uphill battle of making the decision to sometimes
Right.
reach out
Right.
or to decide you need help. And I think if I've learned anything from the last 6 months, it's raising your hand and saying, it's okay not to be okay, and I'm not okay, or I need to talk about this, or even sometimes just sharing, and I've gotten a lot more vulnerable about sharing things. And now I'm kind of just comfortable with it, where I'm like, there's nothing really to be embarrassed about, because I think ultimately most men want to be perceived a certain way. And that's the funny thing, is we all want to be perceived to be strong and happy and healthy and don't need support and independent, whatever it is. But the reality is there's not really a single person in this world that has all those traits.
Yeah. No one has it together.
Yeah.
All completely together.
Yeah.
I mean,
and so whether you're a man or a female, like male or female, it doesn't really matter. Like ultimately, I think just reaching out when things aren't okay is actually just probably the best thing you can do, because it's going to somehow, some way, either through just conversation, that conversation lightens the load a little bit. And then the next step is you might get a little bit of feedback. You might think of things a little differently. Somebody might share with you something they went through, that then they were able to overcome it. And that might be a way for you to overcome it.
Right.
Or just through conversation, you might realize, wow, like this is lingering. Like this is serious. I need to take care of it. I need to get more help and things like that. So,
and it's the pain that, makes you stronger. And just like in working out, there's pain when you work out, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't work out a whole lot, but I know that, there's pain, and that's how you get stronger. So in all the pain that we go through, that's what makes us stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually funny. Like 2 days ago, I was doing squats, and that was what I posted across the top of it was I was like, nothing in life could honestly hurt me as much as the physical and mental pain I do to myself every day in here training, because and quite frankly, that's why I fell in love with the gym, is because that is my outlet of being able to get out of my own head. And if I am in my own head and I'm mad about something, or I'm angry about something, or depressed about something, whatever it is, whatever the emotion is, I could leave it there.
Yeah.
I could really push through it. And it's interesting because in the gym, there's their own community, because a lot of people who are there for the same reasons. They're battling through something.
Right.
Some of them are just there to try to get healthy, but there is really some great studies about mental health and what physical activity does.
Absolutely.
For it. One of my friends, just to kind of close this out, he had started a break room. I don't know if you've heard of those.
Oh yeah.
But those are a great outlet as well. So, he had shared with me that what he noticed was a lot of the people who were going there were men who decided to do that as their actual outlet initially.
Yeah.
It's just like they're so angry or so upset about something, they just want to break something.
Hit something.
Just want to hit something. Yeah.
That's why this Gloves for Grief thing has become, quite, I mean, it's an amazing, their events are amazing. And I would say it's about half men, and it's, it's growing. And yeah, I'll give you that information.
I will. I'll share it.
It's very cool.
Maybe I'll reach out to them.
Yeah, you should.
My son's in boxing, so that might be a great way for us to do something together.
They're great. You should have Ashley and Tara on your podcast.
They're a double duo?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. One's the trainer, and then one's more the, behind the scenes. She's the doer of the thing. And I was going to say, if you're doing something with men in grief, my husband would be, he's my sidekick for what we do with everything. I mean, he's really the one that leads and teaches most of the things. I'm more the heart and the, one-on-one kind of person, but he really leads the classes. And so he could be a good one too.
Right.
So
before we end things, I'd love for you to just kind of tell people where can they pick up the book. I know it's on Amazon.
Yep.
Sounds like they can get it on 828 Hope.
Yes, they can go to our website, 828hope.com, and on Amazon. But make sure you put in 8:28.
Okay.
Hope in the darkness.
Okay.
Or else if it's just 828, it will pop up with a whole bunch of other stuff. So
yeah, don't order somebody else's book.
Don't order someone else's book.
Please don't order somebody else's book.
Zoom in on the book.
Okay. And then if somebody is interested, I mean, obviously we're not too far from Saddleback. So if somebody wanted to participate in the 8-week program,
We're doing it by Zoom now. I mean, that was a blessing of COVID. We
okay,
thought, how can people really connect through Zoom for something that's so intense and sensitive? But we opened it up, and we've got people from all over the country. We had a woman from Tasmania
wow,
join our group.
okay,
So it doesn't matter where you are. If you need help with loss, then just reach out to us.
okay.
Yeah.
And your first event, whenever you have it for your foundation, please let me know. I would
I
love
will.
to assist in any way I
I
can.
will. Can I close with I know I'm not a huge Bible verse uh, memorizer or whatever, but
Yeah.
there is one that I just love that is really the reason why we do what we do besides the 828. Um, but it's 2 Corinthians 1:3 and 4. But what a wonderful God we have. He is the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the one who so wonderfully comforts us through our hardships and trials. And why does he do this? So that when others are hurting, we can comfort them with the same comfort he provided us.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so it's kind of why we do, and what we talked about earlier. It's like we are blessed by helping others. And why do we do that? Because he has comforted us.
Yeah.
So
Well, your book has helped me in a lot of different ways. Like I said, it was emotional for me to start reading. It was emotional for me to receive it from Claude. I really I shared a lot about that and how that made me feel. I was saying that it was like I felt like I was walking through mud. Like I knew I was moving forward, and people were reaching out and willing to throw me lifelines, and I was just like, I can do this by myself. And I just kept saying I was okay, which is, I think what most people do.
yeah.
And Claude threw me a lifeline, and your book has been amazing, and I highly recommend it. So I want to thank you for also taking the time and making the decision. And like you said, it came to you from God, right? And so
Absolutely.
there's obviously a lot of religious things in there, but at the end of the day, I don't believe anybody would call it a religious book.
Yeah, I hope that's the case. It doesn't matter what your faith background is. I think that we're all going to go through grief. We're
Right.
not going to escape it. And it doesn't matter what your faith background is. That happened to be the thing that helped me through it the most and what I trust in. But I think there are things in the book that is helpful to anyone
I
going
agree.
through loss.
Yeah, no, I agree. So I just want to thank Claude. I want to thank you for writing it. It's been very helpful to me. I'm going to share it with as many people as I can. Like I said, I'm going to give a copy to Jessica. I'm going to give a copy to my mom. And, I think ultimately there's a lot of people that are going to find value in it. So you definitely, I'm sure you're very proud of what you've done, but if not, you should
It's
be.
him. I can't
Yeah.
take any glory for it. It's not me, but thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And thank you for taking the time to come on here. And so I just, again, really want to say thank you.
Thank you. It was very nice to meet you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I'm going to give you a hug again.
All right.
One more hug. Thank you so much.
Today by Karen Badal-Hacker. Today I will remember your life, not your death, and hold on to the precious years, days, and moments we shared. Today I will give grace to those who may say inappropriate things, for they just don't know what to say. Today I will forgive my family and friends who haven't comforted me the way I need them to, because they simply don't know how. Today I will not push away my emotions. I will identify and acknowledge my feelings and let them soak in, for I know that is how I will heal. Today, I will reach out to a friend or a relative, for surely they are hurting too, and perhaps we can strengthen one another. Today, I will free myself from guilt because I know deep in my heart that if I could have done anything to save you, I would have. Today, I will learn to live knowing there will forever be unexpected emotional triggers that remind me of you and may set me back. Today, I will look for the gifts God provides: a timely song, a beautiful sunrise, a call from a friend, a rainbow, a rose in full bloom, a hummingbird, or a butterfly. All special gifts to remind me that God is with me and I am not alone. Today, I will reach out to another who has had a similar loss, since I have an understanding of how they feel and may be able to provide some comfort. Today, I will cling to my faith, for I know that when I am weak, He is strong and will carry me. Today, I will remember to take care of myself and give myself permission to decline events I'm not ready to attend. Today, I will honor your memory by doing something special for someone else because I know that would have made you proud. Today, I will not compare myself to others and remember that everyone grieves differently and in their own unique way. Today, I'll choose to be happy, for I know you wouldn't want me to be sad and feel guilty for continuing to live. Today, when I feel heartbroken, I will stop and remember that grief goes hand in hand with love. I grieve deeply because I had the privilege of loving you deeply. Today, I will accept that I did not die when you did. I am alive. My life will go on, and I must choose to make that life meaningful and significant. Today, I will accept that grief never ends. It changes, and I will become more comfortable with it as time goes on. Grief is not a sign of weakness, nor a lack of faith. It is the price of love. Today, I choose to love and live.